So, as Mark said, we've nearly completed our process of regeneration now, but we wanted to finish with planners, and specifically planners who have been there and done that when it comes to regeneration. So we're going to hear from two really brilliant advice professionals sitting alongside me who've gone on their own journey, in quote marks, of regeneration. So first up, we'll hear from you, Greg. Greg Moss from 11-2 Financial Planning, who regenerated by striking out on his own and setting up his own firm. And then we're also joined by Marina Herbert from Herbert & Webster, and as a firm they've gone on their own process of regeneration in terms of the ways of working, so she'll also talk a little bit about how she got to that starting point. So Greg, I'll probably start with you. So yeah, big theme of the day, regeneration. You, at a relatively recent point in time, was it a couple of years ago?
Yep, about 3-4 years, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Decided that you wanted to set up your own firm, go it alone. What were the kind of factors that drove you to that point and wanting to sort of go it alone?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I was a relatively sort of old startup person, sort of didn't have a typical journey, I guess, because I think a lot of people who set their own firms up are, really sort of sexy and entrepreneurial and, have a burning desire to do it from a really young age. I did it when I was 40, and prior to that, I'd had, I think, nearly 20 years of employed roles that I'd sort of been diligently working away in. So I sort of joined from uni, the industry, went through RDR and all of that good stuff. I had a mostly disappointing experience, to be honest, as an employed advisor over that period. Never quite found the role that I was looking for, never quite found the right place to look after my clients the way that I wanted to and had a vision for. So by the time I kind of decided to do something different, I was pretty much done with financial advice, pretty much done with financial services, and pretty sort of depressed about life generally as well. But I was looking at a complete change of scene, and applied for teacher training and completely different things, and thought I was going to do something exciting and meaningful with my life.
Yeah.
But I got sucked back in, obviously. It's like the mafia. It's not like the mafia. So I figured, if I was gonna do that and make a change that big, I might as well try self-employment and try doing it on my own before I did that, which kind of felt like a fairly major and scary change. So I was sort of...
it's a big leap, isn't it?
It was a scary one, and I guess the fact that I hadn't done it before then, after all those years, kind of said that, it says that I was a reluctant sort of startup person, entrepreneur, whatever. But I really wish I'd done it earlier, because, I've got to say, sort of 3-4 years in, it's nowhere near as hard as I thought it was going to be, actually. And I know people don't say that about self-employment. I wouldn't say that it's easy, particularly in the early stages of it, but you lose a lot of crap that you get in employed roles at other people's firms. I think politics, the egos, the interesting characters. I think I think you can walk away from all that, and actually that removes an awful lot of distraction from the picture, because I've always felt that the role to me is triangle between me as the advisor, the client, and product solutions advice that I put them in with, and I want as little distance between those points of the triangle as possible. And I found increasingly toward the end of my time in employed roles, there was just too much stuff between those three things, getting in the way, slowing it all down, compromising my ability to do the good stuff for clients that I wanted to. And that was the theory anyway, and actually in practice, that's exactly how it's worked. I found that by being able to pare it right down, becoming a very small firm, removing all the extraneous crap that was just getting in the way of stuff, I'm able now to give the best service to clients I think I've ever been able to over quite a long period in advice. And I never really suspected that would be the case, that the model that would work best for my clients would be a tiny business with me as the sole advisor in it, but it turns out that's the case.
Okay, so if I could just walk it back a bit. So when you were sort of setting out, you'd made the decision, right, whatever came before wasn't working for me, I'm going to try my way and do it myself. What kind of expectations did you have around what it takes to be a business owner, I guess?
I think I hugely overestimated what you needed to know on your own. And, you know, I had this idea in my head that the guys that owned the businesses that I worked for were, you know, these kind of masters of the universe, Steve Jobs type guys that had some
wearing
special...
black polo
yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Knowing
Some of them
everything.
thought they were, so that probably helped. But so, you know, it felt like they were other people. It felt like people who set up their own business were people who were different somehow from me.
A bit apart, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Some sort of kind of slightly different type of person that had some X factor that I didn't have, and that's you know, it's complete nonsense. It's not true. And you know, I think I've kind of demystified the whole working for yourself thing to the extent that I look back at it now and I think, yeah, why didn't I do that a long time before? Because you know, if you don't cut corners on your support, and there are lots of good people in the industry that will give you help and guidance. A lot of great kind of ancillary services that you can bring in around, well, you know, all the good bits, compliance, investment services and stuff. Plenty of people that you can get that stuff off. And I think the thing that surprised me the most actually about being a very small firm in financial advice is you don't have to compromise at all on anything. And that's strange in a way because I kind of imagined that at big firms they'd have all the economies of scale, all the sort of intellectual property, and I wouldn't be able to compete with them. But I think we're a strange industry in that we're very democratized. You know, a little guy like me, working out of a bedroom with my dog, can compete very high up the spectrum in terms of complexity of client needs, client wealth levels, and all that good stuff. Go toe to toe with them with a proposition that's objectively better than somebody at some Swiss private bank or whatever, and offer them a service that's better in, you know, in most areas for significantly lower costs. And enjoy the job more while you're doing it. And it seems odd because I don't think it works quite that way in other professional services. But I think, you know, I've ended up sort of feeling like a kind of can fly the flag for very small firms because I think they have a really important role in the advice sector. And I think that should sort of be recognised. I think there's so much good practice, so much innovation in these very small firms. And, you know, the one thing about them is that, you know, they're all mostly run by advisors that really care about their clients and run through walls for them. And I think that gets diluted a lot of the time at bigger places.
Okay, cool. There's a lot in that, so I'm going to come back to that. But I'm going to bring Marina in just now. So, Marina, your sort of starting point, I guess, is slightly different because you've gone through regeneration, but you've also kind of had to do a bit of homework, a lot of self-analysis before you could even then do the regeneration that you wanted. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what you had to do on the business before you could then do the regeneration that you wanted.
Sure. So I think a few years on from having started, what we then realised is that the business grows. It doesn't matter how you put it, it grows, and you start becoming a little bit of a bigger team. And after a few years, we could tell something wasn't quite right, and we didn't know what it was. Profit wasn't what it should be. We were very busy. There was sort of issues, and I knew there was pain points, but I didn't really know what it was. And I thought, well, we're all people who've left a big corporation to do the right thing, and it's not working, and I don't understand what's not happening well. And I think we did a bit of homework, and the actual realization came at some point, and I started business with someone, so that's perhaps different, but we hadn't really explained what our vision was. Mm-hmm. And I think the way we'd formed the team to us was obvious, but actually we hadn't really explained where it is that we wanted to get. And I think as the business grew, those sort of tensions became apparent, and we thought, okay, we've got to do something. And once we were able to do our homework and sort of say, so what it is that we want to do, and we realized that, year 7, 8, we hadn't put on paper what our vision was. Uh-huh. What even our values were. We thought that only big companies with big marketing budgets did that, and that, you know, we were too small to even have to worry about those things. It was bringing clients on so we could be a surviving business. And a few years later, it's, you know, sheer will and brute force isn't enough anymore. So you've got to find a way to bring your business to the next level. And I think once we were able to explain the vision, it really helped put things in place. And I think where we were trying to do things, and perhaps the team wasn't getting it. I think they were perhaps getting a little bit numb to the new initiatives, and sort of thinking, oh, it's another thing Adam and Marina are doing, and sort of thing. So we were
project fatigue almost,
right?
Yeah.
And we were losing traction, and we were thinking, how do we inject this sort of pure energy that we had at the beginning when people started joining? And so we want to be with you, and we got lost a little bit before we found ourselves again. And I think the minute we got a little bit clearer about where we were, where we wanted to be, it really helped, I think, the team sort of say, okay. And that's perhaps why some advisors at the time were thinking, why should we go into mortgages? And we're like, no, that's not part of the plan, and they were frustrated with us, thinking, well, they're not listening to us. And it was, it felt very much like business owners versus the team.
Yeah,
and that was wrong.
I think probably a lot of people would probably resonate with that if they are working in sort of teams, that you do sometimes get a little bit of tension, and especially if, the owners come in and they're like, we've got a vision, and I can imagine some teams, oh God, a vision, here we go.
Another one.
Another vision, exactly, another project. So perhaps you could tell me a little bit more about what did you need to do to make sure you had the right team in place for where you wanted to get to, the right infrastructure? Presumably that wasn't all smooth sailing.
I think it got fractious and disruptive before it got harmonious again. But in the meantime, we also joined a program run by Brett Davidson called FP Advance. I'm sure a lot of people would be aware of it. And that really helped me with the guidance of what it is that I was trying to achieve and how, what step to follow so I didn't get lost into yet new projects. But I think we really had to say to the team, look, this is where we want to get. This is the type of clients we want to attract for this to happen. This is the sort of support team that we want to have behind us. And I think what it did eventually is that the people who really resonated with that got a stronger feeling that actually the method might have changed throughout the years, but the aim was always the same, that reassure them. And I feel they're even more behind us now. And didn't expect that, but there was a couple of chaps on the team who thought, that's not for me, and that's cool, okay, to say, actually, you're on a different trajectory. Whatever you're set to do, so long as you do well and you do good, do your stuff. But sometimes being in the same industry doesn't mean that you're all going in the same direction. And I think the realizing we were not all on the same page was obvious but not apparent. It was the first thing to say, right, okay, that's my first issue to address. Let's make sure the people who are on the team are going to want to be on the team for the right reasons. You can't protect the team for bad days. There's going to be the frustrations of providers, of regulator, clients not going back to you. You can't help that. But you can make sure that if you've got the right team with you and you're all sort of rowing in the same direction, those bad days are taken together in a way and you keep going.
You have to probably be quite committed to that, I imagine, when the shit's getting real and you're having difficult conversations and people are going, I'm going to walk, you're having to sort of stay true to that vision. So were there those kind of quite difficult conversations where you almost had to brace yourself and go, no, this is the vision, we're sticking to it? Yeah. And
I think that was my biggest challenge. My business partner is the most positive and optimistic person in the world, which doesn't help because sometimes they're like, aren't you worried? No, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. We're doing the right thing here. My biggest challenge was to make sure that I always stayed on track. We said this is what we will do and not let sort of exception or outside noise deroute us and sort of almost make us lose track of that. But yeah, that was quite tough. I did find it, and it's hard to not get personal and emotional because it's your business. You feel like you're personally being rejected, I guess, because why don't they get this is where we want to get to? Why am I not good enough for you? I've started this. Our clients think we're good enough. What's happening here? That was tough. Yeah. Luckily, you're through the other side, so we'll park your story and come back to Greg now. So, Greg, I think you'd sort of said when you'd kind of got disillusioned, I think, perhaps with where you were, you wanted to start again. You had this vision of the black polo neck wearing Steve Jobs type figure of business ownership, and then that didn't turn out to be the case. So, I guess where were you kind of pleasantly surprised in terms of building a business, client bank proposition, all of that good stuff from scratch? Where were you kind of like, I actually can do this, there is material out there? Maybe talk us through that a little bit, where you kind of
got the confidence in yourself through that process?
Sure. I think I talk to my clients a lot, because I think some of the things I was sort of nervous about were kind of the slightly sort of intangible things, and I thought it was going to be like an office, for example. I thought it was going to be a really big deal whether I had an office or not, and where it was sited, and whether it had our logo above the door and all of that type of stuff. So I just asked some clients about it, and they seemed to really not care at all. None of them. Some of them said it'd be nice to have a meeting space to kind of come away from home and see you if that environment works best for us. But this whole idea that you needed an office, for example, to kind of inspire confidence and sort of reassure people and give them a physical space to sort of know you're not going to run away with their money overnight. It was just like completely in my head. It was my own sort of hang-up. I think there's quite a lot of stuff like that I kind of thought at the beginning was a big deal and actually isn't. And I think what clients really value is quite narrow in a way, and it's sort of cliche and it's a bit trite, but that relationship with that advisor and the consistency of who their contact points are and the trust that you build up with them, they sort of don't really matter. They don't really mind, so it doesn't matter what you hang around that particularly, all the sort of the extra kind of stuff. So, I made some decisions kind of quite early on that were, again, just kind of discarding things like that I just didn't think were particularly necessary for that phase of the business, and freed up budget to have other things that I thought were going to be value adding. And again, absolutely didn't want to cut corners on any of that core stuff that the clients are going to feel in the service and in the solutions that I put together for them. So in terms of, I guess, platform technology and back office technology and investment governance and all of that stuff. And cash flow software. Again, like I said earlier, you can pick the very, very best solutions in all those areas and have all the very best bits of them quite easily from quite an early stage without adding astronomical cost. And I was kind of reassured by that, really, that you can get all these good bits, put them together in a way that is achievable for a pretty small firm.
Yeah.
I guess.
And did you? I wonder if you had any nervousness around sort of making that switch from being part of a, I guess, bigger operation in the past where you had different people to do different things. When you're in a small company, that's kind of exaggerated, and when you're setting up on your own, that's exaggerated again, like tenfold. So did you have any kind of qualms about, well, I want to deliver this superior quality client service, but it's just me doing that? And if you did have those concerns, how did you kind of overcome them, I guess?
Yeah, sure. I sort of imposter syndrome, I guess, isn't it? Which, I guess I had a lot of, but beforehand, I guess there's just the sort of sheer pressure. Like I say, I don't think it's difficult. I think the bits you need to assemble to give a really good service in a small firm and have a really good product, it's not difficult to do that. But I do think you feel a lot more pressure kind of being responsible for every element of it.
It's like all the different hats you have to wear, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's that guy in Spirited Away with all the arms, in the boiler room. I felt like that on occasion. There was definitely a phase at the very beginning where I was kind of having to be sort of like website designer and figure out a lot of accounts stuff that I'd never really had to get into in that much depth. And see, compliance-wise, you just need depth of knowledge in a lot of areas. I always sort of felt like I was a reasonably rounded advisor in terms of wanting to know about some of the areas around the advice process. So I guess I had a bit of knowledge, but I definitely had to kind of like learn a lot of other stuff quite quickly. But it's interesting though, just in terms of the sort of the range of tasks you've got to take on as a very small firm. I took to that well. I enjoyed it, actually. One of the things I didn't really like in big firms is this kind of assumption that if you're an advisor, you get typecast as, your job is very much to be beating the pavement, trying to find new business, and that's actually what you're good at, and that's what you're here for, and we don't want you doing your own power planning, or there's a lot of other things that you're sort of actively discouraged from doing. And I don't work like that, and I didn't as an employed advisor, and that was a source of tension, I think, at certain places that really wanted to kind of silo the work.
This is what we define an advisor as, and that's what you're here to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a very neurotypical way of working, I think, isn't it? That's your task, and you're always going to be on that task, and you're not going to stray outside of it. And actually, I work much more dynamically than that for those reasons. So, I do mostly my own power planning, now outsourced sort of some of it kind of overspill stuff, but I don't mind it. You know, I think this idea that advisors really hate typing up their own reports doesn't apply to all advisors, and I know that because it doesn't apply to me. So I felt quite liberated, actually, to decide sort of what bits of the work I wanted to do, and it wasn't just the bits that it had been assumed I wanted to do. You know, so there was a bit of a sort of process of discovery around actually which elements of the job am I happy to kind of fill in around the advice, and it turns out it's quite a lot of them actually that it had been assumed that I didn't want to do when I was employed.
Okay, great. And Marina, if I come back to you now, so I think where we left you, you'd kind of gone through this process of you'd worked on the business, you'd established the team that you needed to be on side with you, and so I think over the past year or so, you've kind of actually started doing the actual regeneration now. So you've done that work, and now you're doing the regeneration. So, I mean, I think it spans quite a lot, and more probably than we can go into here, but there'll be things that you've done to, I guess, future-proof your firm, so that I think changes to your tech stack, ways of working, target market, marketing. You've changed up all of that, haven't you? So why don't you pick out some of maybe your favourite areas in terms of where you've made those changes now that you've done the business work?
So the most exciting one, although I don't do it, but it's the marketing, because it's really focused now, and there's someone in the firm that has good fun doing it. It's really allowed us to give direction, and I think there's being on that Brett Davidson program, he just really advises you to only work with the clients you love working with, and all of a sudden it's sort of that, oh yeah, well, I should just have fun for the rest of my career, right? And that really was fun to just turn the marketing and say, well, perhaps we attract this sort of client, perhaps we say that, we said that. So, oh, but not everyone's going to like it. And all of a sudden you think, yeah, but we can't attract everyone. There's so many people in the UK, we can only service so many. Let's only attract the ones we want. And that was quite nice, because now we have a team that we love, but also we've only got clients that we love. Nice. And I think that from the word go, when we started, I don't think we would have ever been brave enough to say, we don't like you as a client, so we would like to not take you on. And it's really liberating now to say, actually, there's a bit of an internal process, and if the client doesn't answer those criteria, and it's not just assets under management, actually, there's no room for a-holes. And if someone gives a bad vibe, if they talk badly to the admin staff when they call for review, or they go. We don't want people who just respect the advisors, or it's, everyone's got, and that's really cool to be able to say, like we were saying earlier on, I felt a bit like a hippie when I sort of said, I just want nice people around. There's just so many people around us. I just, don't want to deal with the toxicity at any level. Why should that not apply to our clients? So I think the marketing was exciting, because all of a sudden we were in control. There was no compromise. It was like, we just take the people we like.
Well, I suppose in tandem with that, then you would also have had to have done work on who are those target clients, who are we talking to?
That was fascinating.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think historically, when we try to look in sort of your market, like what's the right word, audience, target audience, and that sort of thing. And of course, in the sideline, you've got the regulator talking about prod and segments and that sort of thing. I think we were looking at it perhaps in the wrong angle to start with. And is it a profession? Is it, that sort of thing? And what we've done is narrow it down to more sort of like a sentiment type of client. Earlier on, the two companies were talking about delegators and, trying to work with that sort of people who emotionally or sort of logically do you bring the most value to? And then you start working out your groups, and you could say, well, that family will think that we're really useful because we add value here, we add value there. That would not interest that person because they do not have those needs. And the more you work this out, the more you're able to funnel. And of course, the more you work with those clients, the better you become at servicing them, because you're so in tune with their needs. All the initial meetings end up going like, you hear sort of prospects saying, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. And it doesn't have to be someone who's been disappointed by a big bank. It doesn't have to be, we're peers in the industry, aren't we? We don't steal each other's clients. There's so much work for everyone. Yeah. It's just clients who genuinely didn't get the right cash flow experience, the right planning experience, perhaps thought that IFAs were about product pushing and actually, be able to sort of work within that. So that was a really interesting sort of journey, because now when clients come on, they're engaged. We don't have to chase them so much. It's fun to be with them.
Yeah, no.
And often when
that's
they're business owners, we've realised that we end up being their clients. If one of them does Windows and we need Windows, we call, and that's it becomes a really nice relationship.
Yeah, no, that is really nice. Right, I'm going to take some questions now. I don't know if we'll take them in the room, but I will try and take them through the app. But if you do want to ask a question in the room, then I'll see if I can get a mic to you. So the first question is to Greg while he pours his water, so I'm going to speak really slowly. But you can maybe think about this while you pour. Somebody wants to ask, what was the biggest barrier that you maybe didn't foresee when you were setting up on your own?
Dropping mic packs on stage actually was the... Is that all right? Will that still work if I put it back?
I think you should be okay.
Sorry,
I think I'm okay. Sorry.
Just project.
I'll just stand up for a bit. Right. Biggest barrier? Actually, I'd probably say I think the hardest thing at the very beginning was losing that sort of network of people around you that you automatically get when you work for a bigger firm. Pack animals, aren't we? Sort of like socially, just all the kind of chatter you get is quite sort of quite sanity, sort of preserving, I think, being sort of, part of a common cause at work and being able to sort of, whatever, slag off an annoying client or whatever before you sack them. But I think you lose that, I think, and I think that makes it quite hard because you can get isolated. But also, just on a sort of practical level, having a knowledge network around you. I think the point was made earlier that the sort of the facilities to go and get technical advice in the industry not really there in the way that it used to be, which I think can be a challenge, because if you've got this really, really kind of crunchy question on bonds or I don't know, whatever, lifetime allowance, it's like where do you go and get that? And I found that really, really hard at the beginning, because sort of technically I'm all right, sort of not like heavyweight, and I think there are kind of areas of advice where I'd want to speak to somebody else and get their view on it and get sort of 4 eyes checks and stuff. And you don't have that obviously on your own. So for me it was about trying to and I've got friends and colleagues and peers in other firms, so I find that having bonds with those people and kind of cultivating that
network
a little
bonds,
bit.
not the other bonds.
Exactly. Yeah, sort of, and it's, isn't it? But yeah, it is like sort of but like to strengthen that network, and sort of just having people to go and speak to just check sort of technical points. I think I'm right about this, but I've sort of talked myself out of it, and I'm not sure anymore. And I think
it's nice to have somebody just to bounce off and go, "Am I right here?
Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
Completely. And obviously you just get that at bigger firms, don't you? And I worked mostly sort of towards the end of kind of my employed life at kind of multidisciplinary firms as well. So I worked at a law firm and an accountancy before I did this. And so you haven't just got financial planning expertise; you've got like all of it around you. And actually, looking back, that's a really handy, helpful thing to have at your disposal. And all of a sudden, you don't have that, and you can't really phone up some ex-colleague that happens to know loads about trusts and say, "Can you answer this question for me?" You can, I guess, but they'll probably tell you to go away. So I think that was the hardest thing, actually. And I remember going through a phase of consciously having to sort of find people that I could speak to about stuff.
Getting your kind of experts around you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. A question for you, Marina. Somebody's kind of keen for you to talk a little bit more about the client segmentation work that you did. So did you look at things like what life stage the client was in? Were they accumulating? Were they in retirement? Was it legacy? And then work out what each of those clients would value? Or did you approach it in a slightly different way?
Well, to start with, this is going to sound a bit ugly, I guess, but we looked at the most... the clients that would bring in the company the most revenue. Mm-hmm. And so say, well, how do we get more of those?
Yeah.
And then you start looking at common points.
Uh-huh.
And then you sort of say, when we come out from that meeting, those are 3 biggest clients. Their biggest fear is legacy. Okay. Those sort of clients, what their biggest bugbear is having to deal with all that. They're not interested. They potentially could do it. No one has a magic bin with performance, right?
Sure.
You could look at what we do everywhere. And then you can start making groups. So in a way, looking away from anything not profitable. I don't feel comfortable saying that, but it kind of played a massive part.
You have to be a commercial entity, don't you?
It has to be commercially valuable, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then within that sort of most profitable sort of segment, it's really look at what drives clients to you emotionally. Because if someone has built their wealth through markets, looking and trading and perhaps even cryptocurrency, or they're not going to see any value in what we do, and they're probably going to think, well, I've built all that wealth without you. What are you going to come and do? And if they're not worried about anything else, you're not going to be able to demonstrate. You're going to lose your time, if anything, and energy, and you'd find yourself being a salesman almost, trying to bring a proposition to them which is not suited.
Yeah.
So once you start, and I know some firms do it with professions. I even know an advisor who only services dentists.
Right.
And he knows their systems, and he's a killer provider at that service. We went through the sentimental route because we think, and I don't know if that sounds perhaps not too industry, but I think it's a lot of coaching and emotion. The amount of people in the room would have had, oh, how much do you spend? And then the husband leaves the room, and then the wife goes, there's a credit card bill I haven't told him about, and that sort of thing. And it's emotional. They don't know how to say this, or, sort of talking about life expectancy. Sorry, I can't say
Expenditure.
that one. No, when you're going to die, expectancy.
Oh, expectancy, sorry.
And then hearing people saying, well, I don't think I'm going to live very long. And all of a sudden they don't project themselves. And is their partner in that same area? So I think finding what drives the sentiment of people to need financial planning, I think is what's going to get them involved. And then when you sat in front of them, I'm sure you'd agree, if you then really build a plan around them and say, don't shorten anything, because if you look at the plan later and say, well, I didn't tell her the truth, so it won't work. To really invite people to say, we're here to sort this priority of yours. Yeah. Let's really get down to it. Then you're going to get those clients engaged. So I think for me, it's a sentimental value. Someone with £1 million who doesn't need it, and someone with £1 million who has a lot of dependence and will not have the same sentimental drive for that money to do something, I think.
So a lot of it for you is like, well, what's kind of driven them to seek out financial planning? Is that a service that matches with what we offer? Okay, perfect. Do we have any questions in the room? If we do, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I've got questions of my own. Any questions here? Not that I can see. Cool, I'll just ask a couple more of my own then. I think probably, Greg, if I come to you first maybe, and I might then sort of put the same question to you, Marina. Do you have any advice, Greg, for those people who are thinking about setting up their own firm? What would you kind of say to them in terms of someone who's gone through that fairly recently?
Sure. I guess, like I said earlier, I would say don't overestimate how difficult it is, I would say, with the right support around you. Don't sort of, I'm not saying, hey, go everyone set up on your own right now, but I think if it's something that you think you want to do, but you think it's not for you for whatever reason, I think you probably should try and put out of your mind the fact that there are particular people, types of people that set businesses up and people who don't, because I didn't consider myself somebody that would set a business up and make it work. So I would say, you get over that if you can. Don't overestimate people who already own financial planning businesses, because they're normal people. I guess other things, I think it's very when you're brand new, I think you sort of charge around and there are lots of things that can kind of use up your budget, and like I said about offices and stuff like that, and big teams and people who do this, and things that you think are absolutely essential, and I think a lot of that isn't really. I would say sort of when you're getting yourself set up, there are certain things that I think are absolutely essential to kind of just for quality of life, and platforms is a good example. I never really, it's a bit unglamorous I guess, but never really appreciated how big a difference using good platforms with good support it is compared to using a bad one, because I think it's very tempting to sort of go absolutely bare bones and use the cheapest solution you can get your hands on, or use loads because you've got freedom to use loads or something. But the sort of platforms that I use just make practice management like 1,000 times easier than it would otherwise be, and I sort of figure that out quite quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you talked really eloquently at the start about how this was a bit of a gamble for you in terms of you'd been in financial planning, you were retraining elsewhere as a teacher, you were like, I'm going to do this now. I think in a practice conversation we had, you talked about it being the last roll of the dice almost for you to kind of set up and be a financial planner. So do you feel like that gamble was paid off for you?
Depends on the day. So okay today. I do. Like I say, it's been a few years that I'm into it, and I enjoy working for my own thing much more than I enjoyed working at other places for various reasons. So I think it has sort of reinvigorated, I suppose. What I don't know. Not love for the job. That's too strong. But moderate I don't know. But
it's that thing you were saying, isn't it, about designing the job that you want, not what somebody else is telling you to do.
Exactly. It's allowed me to reshape the job, I think, for myself in a way that works for me and my working habits, and to give clients exactly what I wanted to give them as well. And that's a big thing, because I've had a client following for the last couple of roles, and always felt slightly like making promises to them about what I'm able to deliver that are then kind of difficult to deliver because of other factors that are kind of around you, like say that sort of that distance between you and them and the stuff you're trying to do for them. So I think having much more directness in that process has been pretty transformational, I guess, in terms of my enjoyment of the job. I think, like you said earlier, really well, in terms of segmenting clients and who you're targeting. So much of it is about fit, isn't it, I think, and like-mindedness. And it's difficult because that doesn't really fit into sort of prod type. It's sort of reductive, isn't it? But actually what I've realized is that the job is so like night and day, whether you're dealing with somebody who's like-minded and really values what you do and is very engaged in it, because some people just love it, they're so into the review process, and then some people just don't think that way about their finances. And I think I've got much bolder, I guess, about having a really honest conversation at the very beginning with clients around, first of all, do you need an advisor? Because not everybody does. I think it's great if it's something that's relevant to you and appeals to you in the way that you work. But I really think there's a lot of people out there that get sort of coerced into taking on an advisor, sold a service, and it's not right for them. And that happens a lot, and I don't think it should. So I'll have a very broad-ranging discussion with people around what are the options for accessing financial services. You could do it yourself. You could robo, or various points in between, or you could use full advice, and all of them have an implication in terms of sort of cost and what you get for it and where the value is. So quite often I'll have that conversation, and the answer will be, actually, I'm going to try this other way or this other approach. And so if they get through that process, then generally speaking, the idea of proper planning really appeals to them, and then they get a lot out of the process. Because I think, we were earlier about clients that aren't engaged with that advice process, and you've got to chase them for reviews and things. I don't think I would have a client like
Why
that.
am I fighting you on this? Yeah.
Exactly, because it should be a partnership, right? Between, and I think it works really well if it is. And I've got quite small client numbers, and, I'm very sort of, I think, I've got quite a lot of knowledge of client circumstances because I've had them for quite a long time with most of those. But with new clients, I'm trying to get to that point. And I just think you can't if they're not engaged in it, if they don't want to sort of entrust that stuff to you. So, by kind of filtering a lot more, I think, than I would have done before, I've ended up with a sort of collection of clients where it really is just a series of partnerships, I think. And that just changes the job completely, because it just makes it much more enjoyable, I think.
Nice, that's really nice. Yeah, that's really nice. And then, thank you for that, Greg. And then, Marina, if I just give the last word to you then. So, you've kind of gone through this kind of cycle now. Hopefully you're out the other side, where you've kind of done the changes that you need to kind of future-proof your firm. Sort of, when you look back on that, what advice would you have for somebody who's about to embark on that process, whether it's kind of wholesale change like you did, team, vision, all the different elements, tech, marketing, clients, or whether it's just one part of that? What advice would you have for somebody kind of perhaps going into that process?
I think it's the consistency. Starting something, sticking with it, I know it sounds simple, but have a to-do list and a to-monitor list. Once you've passed something on to someone, it's actually understanding it doesn't mean it's going to get done. If you don't know it needs to be monitored, you can drop the ball and the person may not come back and things don't get finished, and then you come back to it later, you're frustrated.
Why are we losing momentum on this? Yeah.
So consistency with your team, consistency with your clients, and I think once you've got that in order, then that's keeping that discipline. And there's a great line I heard, which is, you have to work in the business and on the business. And actually now my partner and I would take time away from the business to sort of do our planning. And it sounded pompous when we first started, but we do like a bit of a risk assessment. Where's our biggest problem? And you were talking about future proofing the business. Is okay, so this is now, and you can be down your own rabbit hole, can't you, for quite some time. And then if you forget to look up and look ahead, when it comes to you, your panic decision making process is going to be terrible. So it's to sort of be consistent with the team, with the plans you've got. It's tempting to go and listen to all the noise and sort of say, damn, that needs addressing now, or don't. Stick to it and make room for this. And a tip that I thought was quite ludicrous, but under charge your diary. Put as minimum as you can in your diary, because everyday life chucks in loads of things, and where sometimes I think, brilliant, I've got 4 hours in front of me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to crack on with it. And at the end of the 4 hours, the amount of times where I used to go, started none of it. Took this phone call, there was this email, distractions, da-da-da-da. Yeah. To not overplan your diary, thinking, things take a lot longer than you might think. A website is not ready in 2 months. No. You don't do your compliance revision stuff in an hour. Be realistic with your time and stick with it. And only hire people that want to join that dance, I think. Be honest with who you are as a firm, so you can only attract people for whom it makes sense to join that firm, and that avoids a lot of tension later on, I think.
Perfect. Well, we'll leave it on that positive note then. Thank you very much to Greg and to Marina.
Thank you.
Thank you.